There's something deeply exhausting about constantly chasing love, opportunities, approval, even peace. Many women wake up each morning already tired, not from what they've done, but from all they feel they have to prove. We're told that to be valuable, we must be visible. To be seen, we must be impressive. To be loved, we must be pleasing. And so we run, we strive, we perform. But here's the true thing: the more we chase, the more we lose alignment with ourselves. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she pauses, heart aching, mind racing, and asks, what am I running toward, and why does it always feel just out of reach? It's in that moment, sometimes after heartbreak or burnout or being completely overlooked, that she begins to remember a queen doesn't chase. She aligns. She stops chasing the world. She starts returning to herself. Let's explore what this truly means, not as a cute caption or a quote to pin on your vision board, but as a way of living, thinking, and moving in the world with integrity and peace. Chasing comes from scarcity. Alignment comes from wholeness. There comes a time when we have to ask ourselves why we run so hard toward things that don't feel right, why we chase relationships, careers, validation, or even identities that don't sit well in our souls. Chasing, at its core, doesn't come from confidence. It doesn't arise from clarity or inner peace. Chasing is born in the hollow space of not enough. The aching belief that something outside of us will finally make us feel full. When we chase, we're often not fully present in our own lives. We're reaching, grasping, hustling for worthiness. It might look like ambition on the outside, but inside it's an echo of fear. The fear of being left behind, the fear of missing out, the fear of being unseen, unloved, unchosen. Scarcity tells us we need to run faster, do more, be better. It convinces us that we're only as valuable as the last thing we achieved, the last compliment we received, the last person who chose us. Scarcity never lets us rest. It doesn't want us to stand still long enough to ask ourselves the hard questions. Do I even want what I'm chasing? Or am I just afraid of what happens if I stop? Scarcity tricks us into measuring our worth by comparison, keeping us stuck in cycles of proving. We scroll through highlight reels of other people's lives and wonder why we don't measure up. We say yes to things that drain us, hoping they'll fill some invisible void. We run after people who aren't meant to be ours because somewhere deep down, we're afraid we don't deserve someone who truly sees us. But alignment is a different kind of power. It doesn't need to chase because it doesn't believe anything is missing. Alignment comes from a deep, rooted sense of wholeness, the knowing that we are already enough. When we're aligned, we don't need to force, convince, or control. We don't need to beg the universe or anyone else to choose us. We choose ourselves, boldly, quietly, daily. Alignment means we've taken the time to know who we are, what we value, and what we're no longer willing to tolerate. It means honoring our boundaries, not out of punishment, but out of protection for our peace. It means learning to sit in the discomfort of not knowing and still trusting that clarity will come. It means no longer rushing into decisions out of desperation but waiting for what feels right, true, and honest. There's a calm strength in alignment. It doesn't always look loud or impressive. Sometimes it's the soft refusal to chase love that feels inconsistent. Sometimes it's walking away from a job that looks good on paper but drains your spirit. Sometimes it's simply pausing in a world that worships productivity and saying, I don't need to earn my worth. I already have it. The journey from chasing to aligning isn't linear. It's often painful, filled with grief for the parts of ourselves that believed we had to do more to be loved. But this grief is sacred. It's the shedding of false stories we've been carrying for too long. It's the moment we stop asking the world to fill us and start becoming the kind of person who overflows. Real-life transformation happens when someone who once needed external validation learns to validate themselves. You don't have to earn your worth. It happens when the woman who used to chase love learns to anchor into self-respect. It happens when the dreamer who kept forcing doors to open finally listens to the quiet pull of intuition and waits for the right path to reveal itself. This isn't about giving up. It's about giving in to trust, timing, and truth. Giving into the belief that what is meant for you will never require you to betray yourself to get it. That the right opportunities won't require you to shrink. That the right relationships won't make you feel like you're too much or not enough. Alignment may not bring instant gratification, but it builds a lasting sense of fulfillment. It gives you back your time, your energy, your power. It lets you move through life with more intention and less anxiety. You begin to recognize that peace is a form of success. That rest is productive. That presence is the greatest gift you can offer to yourself and others. When you're aligned, you attract rather than chase. You magnetize rather than grasp. And what comes to you in this space, whether it's love, purpose, or peace, comes not because you forced it, but because you finally made space for it. You don't have to prove anything to be worthy. You don't have to perform to be loved. You don't have to chase what was never meant for you in the first place. Instead, you get to come home to yourself. You get to live a life that feels true, not just looks good. And you get to do it on your terms, rooted, radiant, and whole. So if you find yourself chasing right now, pause. Ask yourself what part of you feels unworthy, what story you're trying to rewrite, what fear you're trying to outrun. Then offer that part of you compassion, not criticism. Remind yourself that healing doesn't come from the next milestone. It comes from meeting yourself fully in this moment. With all your flaws, free and becoming. Choose alignment. Choose the path that honors your soul, not just your ego. Choose the slow burn of becoming over the quick hit of achievement. Choose presence over perfection. Because the moment you stop chasing and start aligning is the moment your life begins to feel like it finally belongs to you. A queen knows her energy is currency. There is a quiet, grounded power in a woman who knows what her energy is worth. She no longer gives it away carelessly. She doesn't overextend herself to be liked, or pour into others while leaving herself empty. She knows that her time, attention, presence, her very essence, is a form of currency, and when she finally begins to honor it as such, everything in her life begins to shift. This isn't about arrogance or ego. It's about clarity. It's about the deep, inner wisdom that comes from learning, often the hard way, that not everyone and everything deserves access to you. A queen knows that her energy is sacred. It is not meant to be drained by proving her worth to people who don't see her. It is not meant to be scattered on relationships that only take and never pour back in. It is not meant to be wasted chasing after things that keep her stuck in cycles of depletion and self-doubt. She has lived through seasons where she gave too much, where she said yes when her whole body was begging her to say no, where she kept showing up for people who were never going to meet her halfway. And somewhere in the middle of all that overgiving, she started to unravel. She started to feel invisible in her own life. But pain, as always, was the teacher. It taught her that boundaries are not walls. They are gates. They protect the light within. They allow her to choose who gets the privilege of experiencing her love, her loyalty, her time. When a woman begins to understand that her energy is currency, she stops apologizing for conserving it. She rests without guilt. She says no without over-explaining. She walks away without dramatizing. She no longer engages in conversations that require her to shrink, prove, or perform. She understands that every interaction is an exchange, and she chooses wisely what she invests in. This kind of self-awareness doesn't happen overnight. It comes through a journey of trial and error, of giving too much and finally saying enough. It's in the realization that being available to everyone is not the same as being kind. That overextending is not generosity, it's self-abandonment. That being drained is not a badge of honor, it's a red flag. A queen knows that protecting her energy is not selfish. It's survival, it's sustainability, it's the only way she can continue to rise, lead, nurture, and create without burning herself to ash in the process. She no longer feels guilty for putting herself first, because she's seen the cost of not doing so. And she's learned, sometimes with tears and heartbreak, that not everyone will understand her boundaries, and that's okay, because she's not here to be understood by everyone. She's here to be in integrity with herself. There is a noticeable difference in how she moves through the world. She's not constantly rushing, not constantly explaining, not constantly seeking validation. She speaks less, but her words carry more weight. She enters rooms without needing to dominate or disappear. She no longer gives away her peace to prove her love. She knows that what she brings, her insight, her intuition, her warmth, her brilliance, is valuable, and valuable things are not tossed around. They are cherished, respected, and handled with care. And because she knows the worth of her energy, she can also recognize when someone else doesn't. She can spot the takers, the manipulators, the ones who only show up when they need something. And instead of confronting them with anger, she simply withdraws her energy, quietly, firmly. She doesn't need to make a scene. She knows that energy speaks louder than words. Her life becomes more intentional. She is drawn to spaces that feed her spirit, people who reciprocate, and work that aligns with her values. She no longer feels the need to chase busyness to prove she's doing something meaningful. She allows herself the grace of slow mornings, deep conversations, and sacred solitude. Because she knows these things aren't luxuries. They're the fuel that keeps her centered and strong. Even in love, she no longer confuses chemistry with connection. She's not impressed by grand gestures that lack consistency. She pays attention to how someone makes her feel in their presence. Does she feel seen, safe, supported? Or does she feel like she's trying to earn their affection with her labor? She's not afraid to walk away from half-love anymore. She's learned that peace is far more valuable than potential. There's also a sense of joy in how she honors her energy. She dances when she feels like it. She laughs loudly. She surrounds herself with people who feel like sunlight. She's not always serious, but she is always intentional. She knows that joy is a form of resistance in a world that often demands burnout, and she protects her joy like treasure because it is. When a queen knows her energy is currency, she stops bargaining with it. She becomes a woman of discernment, not because she's closed off, but because she's finally open to herself. She knows that when her cup is full, she can give from a place of overflow instead of obligation. She no longer pours herself out to earn love. She knows she is love. This kind of woman changes the atmosphere just by being in it. Not because she's loud or flashy, but because her presence is felt. There's a steadiness in her, a rootedness. You can sense that she has come home to herself, and she's not leaving. So the next time you feel the urge to explain your boundaries, overextend your time, or chase something that doesn't feel aligned, pause. Remember your worth. Remember the cost of giving your energy to what drains you. And remind yourself, gently but firmly, your energy is currency. Spend it wisely. She doesn't compete. She creates space. There's something deeply powerful about a woman who refuses to enter the race, who doesn't see other women as threats or rivals, but as mirrors and companions. She's not watching the clock or comparing the scoreboard. She doesn't compete, not because she can't, but because she's chosen a different path, one that honors wholeness over hustle and collaboration over comparison. Competition, when it's rooted in fear and scarcity, can eat away at a woman's spirit. It whispers lies that say there's not enough room, not enough opportunities, not enough love, not enough success. It pushes women into cycles of overachievement, judgment, and self-doubt. It convinces them that they must be the loudest, the prettiest, the most perfect, the most noticed, or they'll be forgotten altogether. She's lived through that. She knows what it feels like to compare her journey to someone else's highlight reel. She knows the emptiness of winning something that wasn't truly meant for her, and the ache of losing herself in the process of trying to be chosen. She's felt the sting of betrayal when sisterhood turned into rivalry, and the loneliness that comes from always being in performance mode. But one day she made a different choice. She stepped out of the race. She looked around and said, "This isn't how I want to live." She realized that trying to be better than someone else was only making her worse to herself. She saw that the world didn't need another woman trying to outshine others. It needed a woman bold enough to create space for others to shine alongside her. She stopped competing because she finally understood the truth. Her magic is hers. Her journey is hers. Her timing, her voice, her path, all hers. No one else can do what she's here to do. No one else carries her exact story, her vision, her heart. And when she stopped looking sideways and started looking inward, everything shifted. She wasn't driven by fear anymore. She was guided by purpose. She became the kind of woman who builds long tables, not taller fences, who celebrates another woman's win like it's her own, who offers encouragement instead of envy, mentorship instead of meanness. She became the kind of woman who turns moments of jealousy into invitations for growth, who sees another woman's light not as competition, but as confirmation that the world is big enough for all of us to rise. She creates space, in her conversations, in her relationships, in the way she leads, in the way she loves. She listens to understand, not to reply. She holds room for both truth and tenderness. She doesn't need to dominate or interrupt or prove. She speaks with authority and humility because she knows that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the safest. Creating space isn't always about doing big, visible things. Sometimes it's quiet and unseen. Sometimes it's choosing not to gossip. Sometimes it's mentoring the younger woman who reminds you of yourself. Sometimes it's simply not making someone feel small to make yourself feel bigger. She understands that every room she walks into is a chance to either shrink people or stretch them, and she chooses to stretch. She's the kind of woman who makes people feel seen. She doesn't need to be the center of attention to know her worth. She knows how to shine without dimming anyone else. She is secure in her own glow. That's what makes her presence so magnetic. Not competition, but confidence. The kind that comes from being rooted in something deeper than applause. And because she's no longer competing, she's free. Free to create, free to explore, free to take risks without fear of falling behind, free to rest without guilt. She no longer measures her value by how fast she's climbing or how much she's producing. Her worth is not up for debate. It's not determined by followers or metrics or how many people are clapping. It's steady, quiet, unshakable. This doesn't mean she never feels envy or insecurity. She does. She's human. But instead of pretending those feelings don't exist, she gets curious about them. She digs deeper. She asks, what does this feeling want me to know? What is it pointing to? Where am I still believing that I'm not enough? And then she meets that part of herself with compassion, not shame. Because the truth is, she's done competing for scraps. She's no longer interested in being the best in a broken system. She's building a new one. One that's based on equity, empathy, and authenticity. One where women support each other, celebrate each other, and lift each other higher. One where power is shared, not hoarded. One where success doesn't cost you your soul. She creates space in her own heart first. She creates space for healing, for softness, for imperfection. She creates space to grieve what she thought life would look like and to celebrate what it's becoming. She creates space for her truth to live fully. Even the messy parts, especially the messy parts, because she knows that true freedom isn't found in competition, it's found in wholeness. And in creating space, she becomes a safe place. A woman of substance, a woman of impact, a woman who leads not with fear, but with love, who influences not by climbing over others, but by standing in integrity. She doesn't just change rooms, she changes cultures. Because when a woman stops competing and starts creating space, she gives others permission to do the same. So when the world tries to pull her back into the race, into comparison, insecurity, scarcity, she gently declines. She doesn't need to run to prove her power. She doesn't need to fight to be seen. She knows who she is, and that knowing is her anchor. She doesn't compete, she creates space. And in doing so, she builds a life that's not just successful, but soulful, not just impressive, but impactful, not just bright, but beautifully rooted in truth. She chooses stillness over scrambling. There's a particular kind of strength that isn't loud, isn't frantic, and doesn't need to prove itself. It's the strength found in stillness. The kind of stillness that a woman chooses when the world is spinning fast around her and everything in her says, scramble, fix, run, chase, and yet, she doesn't. She stays. She listens. She chooses stillness over scrambling. This isn't the kind of stillness that comes from avoidance or paralysis. This is a sacred kind of stillness, a brave stillness, a stillness rooted in trust, not in having all the answers, but in knowing that scrambling doesn't bring peace, and rushing doesn't bring clarity. She's lived through enough chaos to know the cost of always reacting, always running, always rescuing. Scrambling kept her busy, but it never made her better. There was a time when she thought moving fast meant she was doing something right. When silence felt threatening and stillness felt lazy. When productivity was her coping mechanism and anxiety disguised itself as ambition. She thought if she just moved fast enough, maybe she could outrun the fear, dodge the disappointment, fix what felt broken. She said yes when she was exhausted. She tried to hold everyone together even when she was falling apart. And she wore her ability to scramble like a badge of honor. But then something cracked. Maybe it was burnout. Maybe it was heartbreak. Maybe it was just the slow unraveling of trying to be everything to everyone. Whatever it was, it brought her to a stop. A real stop. And in that stop, she discovered something she never expected. Stillness didn't mean failure. It meant presence. It meant surrender. It meant she was finally willing to be with herself instead of trying to escape her own discomfort. Stillness taught her to listen, not just to the noise around her, but to the truth within her. It taught her to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking, to wait before leaping. It gave her time to check in with herself, to ask, is this decision coming from fear or faith? Am I trying to please, or am I honoring what's real? Is this urgency even mine, or am I carrying pressure that doesn't belong to me? She started choosing stillness in moments where she used to scramble. When the email arrived with a tone that felt off, she didn't rush to fix or apologize. She sat with it. When a loved one lashed out, Instead of jumping to soothe or explain, she paused and remembered their reaction isn't her responsibility. When opportunities came up that seemed urgent, shiny, and full of promise, she took her time. She stopped making decisions from a place of panic. She began making them from peace. This shift changed everything. She no longer lived in reaction. She moved with intention. She didn't let external chaos dictate her internal rhythm. She could still feel the pull of urgency, the itch to act quickly. But now she had a choice. And that choice was everything. Stillness gave her space to reconnect with her values, with what actually matters to her, with the version of herself she wants to be, not the one shaped by pressure, but the one shaped by purpose. Stillness helped her hear the soft voice of intuition that always got drowned out in the noise. And when she began to trust that voice, she no longer needed to scramble for direction. She carried her compass within her. Of course, choosing stillness doesn't mean life becomes easy. The world still demands. People still misunderstand. Expectations still pile up. But now she knows that urgency is rarely honest. She knows that rushing leads to regret. She knows that when she gets still, she gets clear. And clarity is power. There's a quiet defiance in her now, a refusal to be pulled in every direction, a boldness in saying, I need to think, I need to breathe, I need to wait. Not because she's unsure of herself, but because she respects her decisions enough to make them from alignment, not anxiety. She understands that the most powerful moves often come after the most intentional pauses, and because she's not scrambling, she's more present. She listens better. She loves deeper. She works smarter. She doesn't exhaust herself trying to control outcomes that were never hers to control. She lets people be who they are and lets herself be who she is. There's peace in her presence now, not because her life is perfect, but because she's anchored in her truth. Stillness has also made her braver, because when you stop scrambling, you have to face what's underneath, the insecurities, the old beliefs, the fears, and she faced them. She did the hard work of sitting with them instead of stuffing them down with business. She learned to soothe herself without abandoning herself. She learned to stay, even when it was uncomfortable. And this stillness, it's contagious. People feel safer around her. She doesn't escalate conflict. She doesn't match chaos with more chaos. She brings calm. She brings grace. She brings thoughtfulness. Not because she's trying to impress, but because she's living from a place of wholeness. There's wisdom in her now, the kind that can only come from lived experience, from knowing what it feels like to scramble and burn out, to pause and rise again. She no longer confuses urgency with importance. She knows the difference between what demands her attention and what truly deserves it. So when the world moves fast, she doesn't always match its pace. She walks steadily. She listens deeply. She makes room for what matters. And most importantly, she makes room for herself. She chooses stillness. Not because she's passive, but because she's powerful. Because she knows that grounded decisions create rooted results. Because she trusts that what's meant for her doesn't require her to run herself into the ground to get it. Because she has nothing to prove. Only something to protect. Her presence. Her power. She becomes the energy she wants to receive. There's a sacred turning point in a woman's life when she realizes that waiting for the world to shift isn't enough. That begging for reciprocity, craving kindness, aching for peace, while natural, will never replace the deep work of becoming those things herself. She stops chasing external validation and starts nurturing her own internal transformation. She becomes the energy she wants to receive. It doesn't happen all at once. This kind of change is quiet and gradual, often sparked by disappointment or exhaustion. She's been the woman who gave endlessly, hoping that one day someone would match her heart. She's been the one who tolerated inconsistency, thinking if she just loved a little harder, stayed a little longer, sacrificed a little more, then maybe she'd finally get the tenderness she gave so freely. But that life left her drained, not just physically, but emotionally. She realized she was holding others to standards she hadn't yet within herself. She wanted loyalty, but wasn't always loyal to her own needs. She longed for gentleness but spoke harshly to herself. She craved presence but was rarely still enough to truly feel, and in that realization, she broke. But beautifully, that breaking became her invitation, an invitation to stop waiting for someone else to show up differently and to begin showing up differently for herself. Not out of bitterness or blame, but out of radical responsibility. If she wanted love, she had to become more loving. If she wanted peace, she had to stop fueling chaos. If she wanted safety, she had to create it from within. So she began doing the work, the deep, unglamorous, soul-shifting work of becoming, not performing, not pretending, but becoming. She started paying attention to how she spoke to herself in the quiet moments. She softened her inner voice. She challenged the lies that told her she wasn't enough. She started offering herself the compassion she so often gave away to others. And slowly, that tenderness changed her, made her steadier, more grounded, more whole. She stopped waiting for the apology that never came and gave herself the closure she needed. She stopped hoping someone would finally make her feel worthy and chose to believe it for herself. Not because everything was healed, but because she finally understood that wholeness isn't a destination, it's a decision. And as she became the energy she longed for, everything around her began to shift. Not because the world changed, but because her relationship with it did. She stopped tolerating half-love. She no longer begged for consistency. She didn't chase affection, she radiated it. The same woman who used to ask, "Why don't they love me the way I love them?" now asked, "Am I loving myself the way I deserve to be loved?" This transformation didn't make her cold. It made her clear, clear on what she would allow, clear on what she would give, clear on how she would lead herself. She started walking into rooms with her head high, not because she needed attention, but because she carried her own approval. She stopped trying to force connections and started trusting alignment. If a space didn't feel right, she didn't shrink to fit it. She honored her own energy. In friendships, she showed up fully and honestly. She didn't gossip to compete. She celebrated. She listened. She held space. And in doing so, she attracted people who did the same. She no longer begged to be included. She became the kind of woman others felt safe with. The kind of woman who made you want to rise. In love, she no longer molded herself to be chosen. She chose herself. She loved freely, but with wisdom. She didn't settle for potential. She waited for presence, for consistency, for someone whose energy matched her own. And she knew that even if that person didn't come, she would be okay. More than okay, because her life was already rich with meaning and love. In work, in purpose, in passion. She gave with fire but protected her flame. She didn't say yes to everything. She aligned her choices with her values. She stopped scrambling for approval and started creating from her soul. She became what she used to search for. A safe place, a loving presence, a peaceful mind, a steady heart. And now, she no longer wonders when the energy she gives will come back to her, because she's already living in it. She created it. She became it. She knows now that the world reflects who we are, not just what we want. So she wakes up each day asking not, "What will I receive?" but, "Who will I be?" And in answering that question, over and over again, she builds a life that reflects her truth, her values, her strength. She doesn't just wait for what she deserves. She becomes it, lives it, embodies it. She becomes the energy she wants to receive. And in doing so, she no longer waits for the light. She becomes it. Alignment is not a moment. It's a practice a queen doesn't chase. Not because she's passive, but because she's powerful. She chooses alignment. Not once, but every single day. She chooses it in how she speaks to herself. She chooses it in how she lets go of what no longer fits. She chooses it in how she stays soft in a world that rewards hardness. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about choosing peace over panic, holiness over hustle, purpose over performance. You don't have to run anymore. You just have to return to yourself. You and trust. What's truly meant for you will never require you to chase it.